and welcome to our first series of DBQ activities. This first DBQ asynchronous lesson is going to be on the Columbian Exchange, or Unit 4, Topic 3 in the AP World Curriculum. So first up, we need to talk about what a DBQ is. Okay, a DBQ is a document-based question. Document-based question. You may remember that in your LEQ, you didn't have any documents to help you with that essay. With an LEQ, you're supposed to be able to use the knowledge that you have from your lessons and from the curriculum and studying in order to answer the prompt, like say, what were the causes and effects of the Columbian Exchange, right? So that would be an LEQ prompt where you don't have any documents. You just have to know what the Columbian Exchange is and what were the causes, what were the effects of that. Okay, with the DBQ, you're going to have 7 documents. Okay, 7 documents, and this essay is going to span 60 minutes. Now, 15 minutes are going to be on the document. So 15 minutes are spent reading the documents and writing on those documents, writing down notes and how you might use them. So essentially a rough draft or outline of your essay. And then the remaining 45 minutes should be spent actually writing the essay itself. Now, you do have to use the documents for this DBQ with its rubric. You have the points that you should already be familiar with, like in the intro, you have the thesis point and the context point, neither of which will require the documents. You should not be using documents in your intro paragraph. That's simply outside information. So background on the topic, as well as your claim about the topic, your answer to the prompt. Then you get into the part where you start using the documents. To get 1 point on the DBQ rubric, you have to summarize 3 of the documents. Okay, and summary just means you read the document and you tell us what it was about, but without quoting the document. Okay, so for instance, if this was one of your documents that you had to do a content statement, meaning that you summarize it, you would simply say that in document 1, Christopher Columbus details the first contact he had with the Taino people and his perspective or perception of the Native Americans, who he assumed were actually Indians, because he assumed he had arrived in Asia rather than in a new continent. That would just be a summary. We don't quote the document at all. We simply give a description of it. If you can do that for 3 documents, you get 1 point. And again, that is the content point. Remember that content is not the same as context. Context is background information. Content is a summary, a 1-sentence paraphrase, instead of quoting, a paraphrase of that document. You get 2 points on the rubric if you summarize 6 documents in using them to answer your essay prompt. Okay, you can get a 3rd point if you give 1 piece of outside SFI, something that is not mentioned in any of the documents. If it's mentioned in the documents, then you can't use it. Okay, so say for instance, I can't use the fact that Christopher Columbus exchanged glass beads for parrots. That would not be outside information. I can't write that they don't have metal, okay, or gunpowder weapons, because that is in this document. So I would have to talk about something that's not mentioned in it at all. For instance, if I wrote about how eventually the Europeans recognized that the continent was new, the new world wasn't actually Asia, that's not mentioned anywhere in this document. So that could be a piece of outside information, like the Americas being named after Amerigo Vespucci once he claimed that it was not Asia as first expected, but a new world. Okay. Then also in your body paragraph. So these points right here, your content points. Okay. Content with an N, your summary. That is going to be in your body paragraphs. Also in your body paragraph is going to be the happy point, which is what we're going to cover today. Okay, so happy point. If you can do happy for 3 of the documents, that is worth 1 point. So thesis and context, you already know about. You've done before with the LEQs. That's 2 points total right there. Then in your body paragraphs, the content and the happy points, there you have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have the complexity point, which you're familiar with already. And so here, as a total of the College Board rubric, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points available. Now on the LAMP rubric, you have an additional point. That is the grammar point, but that is not going to be on the AP exam itself. So how much is the DBQ worth overall? Well, the DBQ is worth 25% of your score on the AP exam. So it is important that you're very, very familiar with these points. Do you know how to give background information for an essay? Do you know how to write a thesis? Do you know how to summarize the documents and give outside information? And do you know how to happy 3 of the 7 docs? Okay, so technically you don't need to use all 7 docs, although we do recommend that you do just in case you mis-summarize one of these. And we try to tell you to use 4 documents for the happy point in case you misinterpret the H or A or P for one of your documents. But that's essentially what the points are on the rubric. Okay, and it is a large portion, a whole 1/4 of your score for the AP exam. So what we're going to get into today is how to apply each of these happy points, okay, H, A, P, and Y, to your documents. So the first activity that we're going to complete is we're going to use the first worksheet that I provided you with. And if you click on this link in the PowerPoint, it'll take you to that. And it's also linked in the Schoology page. But that first document looks like this. Now you should have already completed this part for the homework that I assigned you, although that is also later in the same slide. But we're first going to focus on this top part of the So how we're going to do that is we're going to use this document and apply it to each of the points. H being historical context or background about this document. A being the audience for this document. P being the point of view for this document. What is the perspective of the author? And then the second P being the purpose of this document. So why did the author create this document in the first place? And then lastly, the Y, illustrating why does this answer your question? Why does it answer your thesis or support your thesis? Okay, because remember, with a essay, you need a thesis. So let's pretend that the prompt for this is, what are the causes and effects of the Columbian exchange on the New World? Now, even without looking at the documents, we can list some causes of the age of exploration, and we can list some effects of the age of exploration on the Americas. So I might try categorizing before I even look at the documents. I might look at, say, economic causes. I might look at technological causes of the age of exploration in the New World. And then I might look at demographic. Demographic just meaning population, so demographic effects. There I already have 3 paragraphs, first body paragraph, second body paragraph, and third body paragraph that I could use in my DBQ before I even look at the 7 documents that are provided to me. Okay, so looking at the HIP or the happy point, we need to do either historical context, audience, purpose, or point of view for that document. So looking back at the document, the very first thing that we always do is we're going to look at the source, the citation for this document. That tells us who's writing it and essentially a summary of what it is about. You can't just repeat the source or quote the source line for any of the points in the DBQ. So Columbus, we know that that's talking about Christopher Columbus. This is his journal. It is his personal journal about his first meeting with the indigenous peoples. So it says that they, meaning the indigenous peoples, the Native Americans, in this case specifically the Taínos peoples, they brought us parrots and balls of cotton. And we know that that is eventually going to be a cash crop. So notice how I'm already notating the document. That first 15 minutes of the DBQ section on the exam should be notating the document and start thinking, okay, which of my categories could I put this in, or could I create a category just based on this document and pair it with other documents? So cotton, spears, and many other things which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawksbills. They willingly traded everything they owned. They are well built with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms. Okay, now this is specifically talking about gunpowder technology. We already know that there's no gunpowder technology in the New World because that came from the Old World, specifically starting in China or Asia and then being spread through the Mongol conquests of period 1. They do not know them. They do not know these gunpowder technologies. For I showed them a sword. Okay, they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Okay, so in addition to not having any gunpowder weaponry, they're also not going to have metal weaponry, which we know is one of the causes of European dominance in the New World. So already I can make a note to the side saying, hey, this is probably going to be cause of the Columbian exchange and the dominance of the Europeans there. And we can put that in our category we created of technology. So technological causes for the Columbian exchange and the dominance of the Europeans in the Americas. Their spears are made of cane, meaning wood. They would make fine serpents. So already we know that eventually the Spanish in particular are going to enslave the Native American population through the encomienda. So I'm already jotting down these notes of what I could use in my essay to support my thesis. With 50 men, not a lot, we could subjugate or control them all and make them do whatever we want. Who is we? Okay, well, we know that Christopher Columbus was sent by the Spanish monarchs. Okay, the Spanish monarchs to find a route to the spice trade. So he's talking about conquering the Native Americans with a very small army, okay, hardly even an army, and enslaving them for their labor for Spain. As soon as I arrived in the Indies, believing that he had arrived in India, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts. So already before I have even finished reading the document, I have a series of notes and I have a category for the cause of European domination in the New World that will eventually lead to me talking about the effects of European domination in the New World. Okay, so now looking at our document, we're supposed to answer historical context, intended audience, purpose, or point of view. Now, we only have to do one of these for this document. We do have to do this for 3 documents total out of the 7, but right now we're just applying this to one document to see if we can figure out which of them, H, A, P, or P, is going to be our strongest argument. And we could even H for all 3 of the documents or A for all 3 of the documents. You don't have to do all of happy for a single document, and you don't even have to differentiate and say, okay, for document 1, I'm going to do H. Then for document 2, I'm going to do A. You could technically do H for all of them, which is typically what students prefer to do because they find it to be the easiest of the happy points. So H in happy is historical context. We know that that means background information. So what background info do we have for this document from before period 2, 1450 to 1750, during period 2, or after period 2? And even though it doesn't explicitly say, hey, this is written in 1492, we know that it is, okay, because we know that Christopher Columbus sailed west in 1492, and this is his first contact with people in the New World. So go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to answer this first question. What do you know about period 2, before period 2, during period 2, or after period 2, that relates to this document? What background information do you have? And then provide specific factual information to this. So pause the video and do that first. Welcome back. So now that you've paused the video and you've written down your own answers to this, let's see if any of them fall within what I list for possible answers. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. Your answer could still be right, even if it's not the same answers that I write for historical context. Well, the easiest one we could probably write about is the encomienda. Okay, the encomienda. We know that this is the enslavement of the Native American population by the Spanish. Okay, so we can write about how the Spanish enslaved the Native American population to gather bullion and to grow cash crops like cotton, which was mentioned in the document, but also cash crops like sugar for the Portuguese and tobacco eventually for the English. So we could talk about mercantilism. Okay, the exploitation of colonies in the New World to generate wealth for the mother countries like Spain. We could talk about the 3 G's: God, glory, and gold. Okay, obviously wealth being a motive of Christopher Columbus because he had been sailing west for wealth in the first place to get to the spice trade in Asia. And we could also talk about the glory that was gained for Spain as Spain is entering into its golden age. Remember that in period 1, Europe had been in a dark age. Then they enter into the Renaissance and get all this maritime technology from Asia and all of the Greco-Roman antiquity that had been preserved by the Islamic caliphates. Now they want their own golden age, and that's going to lead to them expanding and beginning their age of exploration. Now, whereas Portugal found a route to Asia and the spice trade by going around Africa, Spain had to find a different route. That leads us to, why is Christopher Columbus coming into contact with the indigenous peoples in the first place? So if you could write that into 1 or 2 sentences of background information, all of this is very specific factual information. Like, look at all of the vocabulary terms: encomienda, mercantilism, the bullion and cash crops, the 3 G's, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance. Okay, all of that is specific background information about this specific document. Okay, so that is historical context. Now, what about intended audience? So go ahead and pause the video and write down to whom you think Columbus is writing this letter. Remember that in the letter, he used the word we. So who is we? Who might he be writing towards? Who might he be trying to convince that, hey, we could subjugate the Native Americans and make them do whatever we want? Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully, you were able to determine that the we is referring to Spain. Okay, specifically the monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. Because remember, Christopher Columbus didn't sail west of his own accord. He didn't have all this money and all these ships and a crew to sail west to prove that he could get to Asia. He had to find sponsors. So even though he's Italian, he's going to be sponsored by the Spanish monarchs. So he's probably trying to convince them that he is doing his job well. He is writing to his sponsor saying, hey, good news. I sailed west and I landed in the Indies. I was right all along. You should definitely give me more money and more ships so that I can cement your claim on this route to Asia. Now, we know that he didn't actually make it to Asia, but Ferdinand and Isabella are going to continue to sponsor him. He's going to make 4 trips total to the Caribbean, okay, because they are searching for wealth under mercantilism, going back to the 3 G's, notably with gold. Okay, so you'd have to be able to explain in a sentence, who is Columbus writing to, or to whom is he writing? And then how do you know? You can't just say the intended audience of the document are the King and Queen of Spain. Okay, how do you know? You could have said it was to the Queen of England. Okay, that's a claim, but you have to be able to prove it. Okay, when he says we in the document, he is referring to his sponsors who funded his expedition in the first place. And since they are his employers, obviously he is going to want to talk about all of the great stuff that he found and the opportunities that he found so that they continue to sponsor him. Okay, so he may even be talking up his successes, like when he says he made it to the Indies. Okay, so the next topic that we're going to talk about with Happy is purpose. So the purpose is, why is the author presenting this? So think of this in the context of you posting something on Instagram, you posting a photo. You are posting to your followers. So let's say that one of your followers is your crush. Okay, so you want to post something that is presenting you in a positive light. So you might post a picture of you volunteering, right? Or you may post a funny meme that you think that they would like, all in the hopes that they would like your photo. Or you might post a very nice looking photo of yourself. So not something from like your school yearbook, like your student day picture, but something of you maybe in your Sunday best, okay? Something where you would look particularly good and with a filter, because what is your purpose in that? What is your purpose in posting that? Your purpose is trying to get your crush to like you. Okay, whereas if you post on your Facebook where your aunt and your mom and your grandmother follow you, your purpose of posting a picture might be more giving them an update on what you're doing or presenting you as being prim and proper and, you know, not posting anything that would get you in trouble. Okay, so thinking of that, looking at this document, why would Columbus write this letter? Why would he write about his first contact with the indigenous people? Why is he writing it in this way? Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to reread the document, okay, and write about why Columbus would be writing this document. So go ahead and pause your video, and then when we come back, we'll go over your answers. Okay, so welcome back. We're going to go ahead and go over what the purpose of this letter might be. And remember, this is not an all-encompassing answer. There's a lot of wrong answers, but there can be a lot of right answers. Okay, just like if for intended audience, you wrote that he was writing to the Queen of England. Yeah, no, that's definitely not going to be his purpose, or the King of England at this time. That's not going to be his audience, right? So the purpose, why is he writing this letter? Okay, well, he is documenting his great success. He believes that he has made it to Asia, that he has found a route for the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. He has found a route for them, for Spain, to the spice trade. Remember that everyone had told him that his way, okay, his going west would not succeed, that he would not be able to use that to find a route to the spice trade. So he's going to see this as vindication, essentially proving that he was right. Now, we know that he wasn't right. He didn't actually make it to Asia. Instead, he made it to the New World. But he believes that he has done a great success. And he wants to convince Ferdinand and Isabella, okay, convince them that he has founded this route, or found this route to Asia. So you can see in the article, okay, in the document, he's talking about how well built and handsome the natives of the Indies are, and that he could easily subjugate them for the glory of the King and Queen of Spain. Okay, so he's trying to convince his employers, his sponsors, that he has done what he has been paid and what he has been funded to do in the first place. Okay, so that could be our description of why he's writing the letter, to write about his great success and to convince his sponsors that he has done an adequate job. Okay, now remember, in this worksheet, I'm just writing down general ideas. I'm not writing complete sentences. It'll be better for your practice to go ahead and write down in complete sentences. So what do you know about period 2 background that relates to this document? Write about the encomienda, or mercantilism, or Spain, and the 3 Gs in complete sentences, like 1 to 2 sentences. Same thing with intended audience. Okay, in 1 to 2 sentences, tell me to whom Columbus is writing this letter, and then explain how you know that he is writing to Ferdinand and Isabella. Okay, same thing with purpose, 1 to 2 sentences. You have to be able to back up your claim. You can't say that the purpose of this document is to make him look good without giving some information as to why. He thinks he has found a route to Asia. He thinks that he has found a route to the spice trade and has done his job for his sponsors. Okay, now the last P that we're going to cover is point of view. So think of this as perspective. What is the perspective and the potential bias, okay, of the author of this document? Well, we know that he is writing about the Taino people, and if we're going to look at his point of view in 1 to 2 sentences, we have to address the abbreviation corn peg. What is Christopher Columbus's class? What is his occupation, his race, religion, nationality, political affiliation, ethnicity, or gender? Okay, so taking this and applying it to like a more personal note rather than applying it to the document. Let's say that I wrote an article about the response to COVID, okay, the response to the COVID pandemic. And let's look at my perspective. Let's look at my point of view and how that may impact my editorial or my article about the response to COVID. What is my class? Well, I am a teacher. I am not incredibly wealthy. Okay. And so I am not going to be in the top 1%, but I'm also not at the very bottom of the socioeconomic scale. So we would classify my class as middle class. I'm not wealthy, okay, but I'm not living paycheck to paycheck necessarily. Compare that to, say, for instance, the King and Queen of Spain. If we were analyzing a document by the King and Queen of Spain, we wouldn't put them in the middle class, we would put them in the wealthy class. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to describe what you think Christopher Columbus's class would be. So go ahead and pause the video and jot down an idea. Okay, so you've unpaused your video. If you said that Christopher Columbus was not rich, but also not poor, you would be correct. Okay, Christopher Columbus could probably be categorized in the middle class. He's not wealthy enough to fund his own trip to the West to try and find Asia, and so he has to go to sponsors. So we have some evidence of that. Now, occupation. Back to the personal example. If we're doing a personal example of me writing an article about COVID, what's my occupation? Well, I am a teacher. Okay, so that could have an impact on how I write about the pandemic or the response to the COVID pandemic. I may look at the response and say, this was not enough. Teachers had to do a ton of work, and students through virtual or face-to-face or hybrid or synchronous or asynchronous. I'd probably go on and on about my perspective as a teacher regarding the COVID response. I wouldn't be talking about my perspective as a parent talking about the COVID response. I wouldn't give my perspective as a CEO with the COVID response. So I may have different points that I want to focus on more so than others. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to pause and think about what is Christopher Columbus's occupation, since he's the author of the document we're analyzing. Okay, so if you said that he was an explorer, okay, and then eventually a conquistador, that would be a good answer for his occupation. So what is his perspective or his point of view in this document? He is coming from the point of view of an explorer who believes he has found a new route to Asia. Okay, so that would be a good use of occupation for his point of view. Race or religion, if we're looking at my personal perspective, if I were writing an article on COVID, on the response to COVID, my race is Caucasian, and my religion, we would just say the general Christian. Okay, does my race have anything to do with my response or my article on the response to COVID? It may or may not. That may not be as strong of an argument as, say, occupation or middle class. So you don't have to use every single aspect of corn peg to answer the question. You're going to want to pick the strongest one. So that probably wouldn't be a strong one for the article on COVID document example. But go ahead and take a moment to think about what is Christopher Columbus's race and Christopher Columbus's religion, and how that might skew his point of view. All right, so for race, you should have put that Christopher Columbus was of the Caucasian race. For religion, you should have put that he was Christian, specifically Catholic. Now, is that going to play a role in his perspective on the indigenous peoples? Well, we already see that he has a bit of a superiority complex, okay, where he describes the natives as easily subjugated and ignorant. So he may see himself as coming from Europe, as being Caucasian, as being superior to the indigenous. Okay, which we do see evidence of with the implementation of the encomienda, enslaving the Native Americans, or evidence of his perspective of being superior, not actuality of being superior. Okay, with religion, Him being Catholic. Well, the indigenous peoples that he comes into contact with are not Catholic. And so that is going to play into his perspective of how he sees these people that he comes into contact with. Okay, now let's move on to nationality. Where did Christopher Columbus originate? Okay, or versus me. Let's say we're applying this again to COVID. Where did I originate? What's my nationality? I am American. I am a United States citizen. Could that play into perspective on the response to COVID? Definitely. Okay, I could say that, hey, I don't think the United States has done a job with responding to COVID compared to other countries like in Europe or in Asia. Or I could go on the opposite side and say, oh, I believe that the United States has the best response to the COVID pandemic. Okay, my perspective based on my nationality and my perception of my own country, whether that's pride and patriotism, or whether it's, oh, okay, maybe that's not the best reaction, that could play into my response. So go ahead and take a minute to pause the video and write down what Christopher Columbus's nationality was. So welcome back. If you wrote that his nationality was Italian, you would be correct. Okay, he's from the Italian city-states, even though he works for Spain. Okay, so that could play into how he views the indigenous people. Being from Europe and not from Asia or from Africa or from the New World, he may perceive Europeans as being superior. Okay, then political affiliation. Okay, would my political affiliation play into my perspective on the response to COVID and how well it was or was not carried out? Definitely. Okay, today with people on the Republican Party, you see that they could be more critical of Biden's response to the COVID pandemic. With the Democratic Party, you could see that they are being more critical of the Trump administration's response to the pandemic. So that could play a role in this article, depending on whether or not I identified as a part of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So think about the political affiliation of Christopher Columbus. Well, we don't have a Republican Party or a Democratic Party or really any parties at this time period. Instead, we have an absolute government. So really not going to see that political affiliation of like parties playing into this. Okay, ethnicity. Ethnicity is separate from race. Okay, race is tied to genetic characteristics that have been defined, and ethnicity relates more to the culture. Okay, so say for instance, I'm Caucasian, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm European in ethnicity. Okay, I may be Polish racially or German racially, dating back to my ancestors, right? But that doesn't mean that I speak German or that I speak Polish, right? Instead, living in America, even though my roots trace back to Europe, okay, my culture, my ethnicity is American. And again, just like nationality, being a US citizen could play into my article on the response on COVID, my ethnicity, my culture, being American rather than European, could play into my response or my article on the response to COVID. So go ahead and take a moment to pause and think about Christopher Columbus's cultural background. Okay, would he fall more under an Asian culture, an African culture, a European culture, or an American culture? If you wrote European, you would be correct. Okay, so the perspective that he brings as a European, how is that going to lead to him viewing other cultures? How is that going to impact his view of the indigenous population? Remember that Europe in period 2 was through a golden age. Okay, they were trying to get their own glory that Africa and Asia had already experienced while Europe was going through the dark ages. So they may see this as an opportunity to, hey, compete with Asia, right? Because he believes he has landed in Asia, and he sees an opportunity to subjugate the people of the Indies as he believes they are. Okay, lastly, in corn peg, we have gender, the G. Okay, so my gender is female. Would that play into my perspective on the response to COVID? No, I don't really think that would be a strong argument there. I haven't really seen any divisions over gender in response to COVID so far, from what I can remember. But then you have Christopher Columbus's gender. So go ahead and take a moment to pause the video and write down what Christopher Columbus's gender was. If you wrote male, you would be correct. So how might that play into his response to the Native Americans? Well, we do know that society is patriarchal, okay, very patriarchal during this time period, but we don't see him writing about women in this document. So we don't really have much of a claim when it comes to gender as impacting his point of view of the natives. So if we're going to look at all of these different things that we have written down, okay, he is middle class, he is an explorer / conqueror, he is white and Catholic and Italian, he follows an absolute monarchy, he is European, he is male. Which of these might be our strongest arguments? Well, we could probably cross out gender as a strong argument. We could probably cross out Italian, okay, because Italy didn't exist as its own country until 1871. Okay, but if we look at class, okay, that class, does that play into his response to the Native Americans? Probably not, because he's trying to find wealth for his sponsors, even though he does get some of that himself. But what about his occupation as a conqueror and explorer? That could play into his response. What about his identity as a Catholic, okay, from Europe? Does that play into his response to the natives? Well, you could probably argue that it does. So go ahead and take a moment to answer these two questions under number 4. What is Columbus's perspective of the people that he describes? Is he respectful? Okay, and what evidence do you have for that? Or is he disrespectful? And what evidence do you have for that? So go ahead and pause the video and reread the document and think what in the document indicates that he's respectful and what in the document indicates that he is disrespectful towards the natives. So first, let's look at respectful. Let's see if I have a highlighter. Okay, let's see if highlighter works. Respectful diction or word choices that he uses in describing the natives. Well, you could say that they're well built. Let's do green. Let's do green for respectful. He says they are well built, they have good bodies, they are handsome. And you could argue saying that they're generous because they willingly traded. But not really too much in the respectful terms that he uses for them. Let's do disrespectful. Let's do that in orange. He could be implying that the fact that they willingly trade everything that they own, okay, as indicating that they are not very intelligent. Okay, so he could be using, hold on, let's do green there. He could be arguing with that, that they are less than intelligent, that they don't know the value of the goods that they are trading for these cheap trinkets that he brought, like glass beads. He could be talking about how they are inferior in terms of their weaponry. They do not bear arms. They don't know them or know about them. So implying that they're ignorant. They cut themselves out of ignorance. They're spears of Cain and therefore inferior. They would make fine servants. Okay, so already looking at them as servants or as subservient to the Europeans. That's not very respectful. We can subjugate them. Okay, planning to conquer people, not very not very respectful. Make them do whatever we want, same thing. Took them by force in order to get information from them. Okay, lots of diction that indicates disrespect. So overall, we see a lot more orange than we see green. And even the positive things, the respectful, quote unquote, things that he says about the natives, kind of objectifies them. Talking about how they're well built with good bodies and handsome features, that may be more leaning towards the line of, oh, I'm planning to use them as servants. They're well built. They have good bodies for labor. So overall, if we were going to argue about his perspective of the natives, he's more so disrespectful than he is respectful. Okay, now we need to apply what about Columbus lends itself to him viewing them in a disrespectful way. Okay, so for his job, we listed that he was an explorer and a conqueror. His religion, okay, Catholic. His ethnicity, European. Okay, these are the answers, or these are the characteristics of his point of view that probably are going to be most reflected in the letter. So go ahead and take a moment in complete sentences to explain how his identity as an explorer or a conqueror or a European or as a Catholic could play into, okay, his perspective on the natives, how he describes the natives. So already with this one document, we have done historical context, audience, purpose, and point of view. Now remember, you need to do happy for 3 out of the 7 documents. And you don't need to do H and A and P and P for all 3. You can do any of these for all 3. Let's say for document 1, I want to do historical context and then answer the why or how does this document support your thesis. Then document 2, I want to do point of view and how or why does this support your thesis. And document 3, let's say I want to do H again. And why or how does this support your thesis? That would all qualify for the point, so long as I answer the question of what do you know about the context of this document? And then I say why or how this supports my claim. So like, let's say for instance, for the document we just covered, I did historical context. I talked about the encomienda and mercantilism and the Dark Ages and bullion and the 3 Gs. Okay, let's say I did that in 1 or 2 sentences. Then I'd have to answer, how or why does this support my thesis? Well, if my prompt at the beginning was causes and effects of European domination of the New World, well, then I would categorize document 1 as a cause, right? Because we did that at the beginning when we said that this shows a cause of European domination. So this document supports my thesis of technological causes of European domination, in that it describes the lack of iron weaponry of the natives and the lack of gunpowder technology by the natives. Okay, so I would have 1 to 2 sentences describing the background information. Spain wants to become dominant and enter into its golden age by finding a route to Asia, but instead Christopher Columbus, who was sponsored by Spain, ends up landing in the New World instead. And then I would go to, how does this document support my thesis? Well, in the document, Columbus lists, he describes how the natives lacked iron weapons and gunpowder technology, thus supporting the claim that there were technological reasons behind the European dominance of the New World. Okay, that's all I had to do. Just one of the HAPP acronyms and then describe how or why. I could have gone with point of view. I could have gone with audience or purpose. It doesn't matter which of these you use, so long as you use one of them plus answer why for 3 out of the 7 documents. Okay, now the next part on your worksheet describes the items Columbian exchange. Okay, so what came from the old world and diffused to the new world versus what came from the new world and diffused to the old world. So to complete that, you're going to go to the PowerPoint and you're going to watch this 5-minute video that I've linked on Schoology, and it's also available in the class assignments or class activities with this PowerPoint. And you're going to go through and answer these questions of, if it came from Afro-Eurasia or the old world, then you're going to put AE. If it came from the new world, then you're going to put NW. Okay, so go ahead and pause this video and go and watch the video that is linked in Schoology for you, and go ahead and answer these questions. Okay, welcome back. So the video gives you the answers here. So to make sure that you actually watch the video and go through the Columbian exchange, I'm not going to give you the answers in this video, okay, because this was assigned for homework if you were face-to-face today. But go ahead and use that information to answer this question. Which of these items, numbers 1 through 11, had the greatest impact, the greatest effect on the population? Okay, so how did horses impact the Native Americans? How did smallpox impact the Native Americans? How did potato impact Africa or Europe or Asia? Pick one of these items and say which one had the greatest impact on the population. That could be a positive impact. It could be a negative impact. But remember, you're going to have to back up your claim. If you say that the arrival of the horse in the New World had the greatest impact on the native population, you're going to have to be able to back that up with evidence. Okay, if you said that smallpox had the greatest impact on the Native American population, well, how do you know? What evidence do you have to back that up? So go ahead and in approximately 3 to 4 sentences, answer that question.